Okay, so today we are going to be reviewing how to identify who is telling the story at various points in a text. Our I can statement tells us that today I can identify the narrator in a story and compare stories told from different perspectives. So at the end of this lesson, we'll be able to identify who is telling the story. Is it the author or is it a character? Just to review what we learned in class, we learned that the narrator could be either an a character in the story or the author of the story. Our anchor chart, who is telling the story? The narrator is the person telling a story. The narrator can be a character in the story or the author of the story. In this graph, it just shows us a couple of ways to know who is telling the story. So over here we have our characters. A character uses the words I, me, my, and we. For example, I love my big sister Ava. We do everything together. When Ava lets me play with her toys, I am extra careful. So those are some of the words that we will hear when the characters are telling the story. Now, if the author is telling the story, if the author is narrator, the author does not use the words I, me, my, and we. Instead, they talk about the story like how we talk about a story. They talk about the people in the book. Megan and Ava are sisters. They do everything together. When Megan plays with Ava's toys, she is always extra careful. So when the author is the narrator, they are telling what is happening in the story. They're calling the characters by their names. They're talking about what they did, what she did, what he did, but they're not using the words I, me, my, and we. Okay, so today we will be reading the story, The Three Little Pigs. Now, in The Three Little Pigs, when we are done, we are going to know who is telling the story. Is the author telling the story or is one of the characters in the story? Remember, as we're reading this story, we are listening for the words that are going to give us a clue as to who is telling this story. Okay? Okay, once upon a time, there lived three little pigs. One day, the pigs left home. It was time for them to build homes of their own. The first little pig built a straw house. When he was done, he sat down to eat lunch. He happily slurped and chewed until suddenly he heard a knock on the door. It was a wolf. I'm going to pause right here because I heard some words that are making me think that this is the author who is telling this story. Right here we see suddenly he heard a knock on the door. It didn't say suddenly I heard a knock on the door. So because I hear that somebody is talking about the characters, I'm starting to think that this is the author telling this story. Let's keep reading to see if I'm right. Little pig, let me come in, said the wolf. Not by the hair of my chinny chin chin, said the little pig. Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in, growled the wolf. The wolf huffed and puffed and huffed and blew the house in. Whoosh! The house became a haystack. The little pig ran to his brother's house. Okay, on this page, it says the wolf huffed and puffed. It didn't say I huffed and puffed. It didn't say we huffed and puffed. It also says the little pig ran to his brother's house. So those are other clues to tell us this is the author who is telling this story. The second little pig built his house out of sticks. The first little pig told his brother about the wolf. Sticks are stronger than straw, said the second little pig, unafraid. That's when they heard a knock on the door. Oh, look, this little pig looks a little frightened. Little pigs, let me come in, said the wolf. Not by the hairs of our chinny chin chins, answered the little pigs. Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in, growled the wolf. The wolf huffed and puffed and puffed and huffed and blew the house in. The little pigs ran all the way to their brother's house. The third little pig built a brick house. He was baking pies when his brothers burst in, crying about the wolf. Let's see the wolf blow down this house, boasted the third little pig. Ooh, boasted. Boasted. What does boasted mean? I think, using my context clues, boasted might mean he bragged because he said, let's see the wolf blow down this house. So he was bragging, like, I know the wolf is not going to be able to blow my house down. Knock, knock, knock. The three little pigs looked at the door. Look at the other two pigs. They look scared. But the third brother, he's like, nope, he's not going to be able to do it. Little pigs, let me come in, yelled the wolf. Not by the hairs of our chinny chin chins, shouted the little pigs. Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in, growled the wolf. The wolf huffed and puffed and puffed and huffed and fell over. The wolf lay on the ground out of breath. The three little pigs lived happily ever after, baking pies in the strong brick house. Okay, so that was the end of our story. So let's review what we've learned today. When we read this story, we came to the conclusion that it was the author who was the narrator of this story because he used words like he, they, and it was telling us what the characters were doing. It wasn't anyone saying, oh, I huffed and I puffed and I blew the house down, or it did not say, I ran to my brother's house. It was all the authors saying the three little pigs did this or the wolf did this. Okay? So remember, we were trying to determine who was telling the story. Was it the author or was it a character? And we know that when the character is the narrator, we'll hear words like I, my, me, and we. When the author is the narrator, we don't hear those words. The author is telling us a story about the characters. Okay? So now what I would like for you to do is to scroll down and answer the text-dependent questions on the three little pigs. Now, just like as if we were in class, how I always tell you, you can go back to the text and find your answers. If you need to replay this video to answer the questions, do that. Once you answer those questions, then hit submit and I'll get your answers and I will see you really soon.